Bush on the police state. I didn't think that was possible.
I didn't think it was possible either, and I was absolutely crushed when I heard it. He obviously was not my candidate of choice, but I took a little bit of internal intellectual solace in the fact that at least we were getting a president who would respect the Constitution. How wrong I was. His disrespect for the Constitution may not be couched in as harsh and obvious and overt terms as in the Bush years, but it's just as bad, just as destructive, and just as willing to overlook specific restraints written in the Constitution to restrain the president as were many of his predecessors.
Well, I've talked to a lot of...
The public will accept it.
Exactly. I've talked to a lot of lawyers and judges, and I wanted to briefly see if you agree. Even though a lot of conservatives didn't like Obama, true paleo-conservatives, libertarian types like Ron Paul and yourself, because he is a constitutional lawyer and practiced it for 10 years as a professor, people expected that Obama would try to, at least on the surface, restore some of the Bill of Rights. But instead, you know, he's saying Constitution, it's just a GD piece of paper.
I too expected that he would show more respect for the Constitution. I read some of the lectures he gave at the University of Chicago Law School. I could have given some of those lectures myself when I taught constitutional law at Seton Hall Law School in Newark and at Delaware Law School in Wilmington, Delaware. But, you know, something happens when you don the mantle of power, and that something is a disdain for the restraint on your power, a disdain for the natural law, a respect that we have natural rights beyond which no government can go, a disdain for the Constitution itself, a disdain for our inalienable rights, same as natural rights, and a disdain for the Bill of Rights. They just simply don't care. They will steal from the rich to give to the poor, to create a class of people dependent upon them who will continue to vote them in office so that they can continue to be taken care of, cradle to grave, by a federal government that doesn't have one iota of constitutional authority to do all of this.
Well said. Final question. I'm going to let you go because I know you've got to fill in guest host for Glenn Beck tonight. And congratulations on your huge success as your star rises, because you're the bona fide constitutionalist. We really, really appreciate you, Judge Andrew Napolitano. But in closing, I would like to get you to comment, on just how special George Washington and Andrew Jackson were. They got all this power and then did give it up. They wanted George Washington to be a king. You know, these were amazing founding fathers we had, and what would they think of what's happening today, where NOAA, Satellite Information Service, the federal government admits the coldest winter so far in the last 50 years, the third coldest in the last 100. Meanwhile, they're openly announcing that they're going to list carbon dioxide as a toxic waste and tax it when humans exhale it. Can you end with speaking about our founders compared to the material we've got in Washington today and what they would think of taxing what plants breathe?
The founders tried to do two things with the Constitution. One was to create a federal government strong enough to protect us from invasion and to do national-type things like run a post office and make sure that there's trade between the states. The other was to restrain the federal government so that it wouldn't interfere with our personal liberties. They specifically gave us a constitution that kept the federal government away from any type of relationship with individuals, because they knew that the greatest threat to freedom comes not from your enemy on the outside who you can see and look at, but from the smiling face of the government on the inside who claims that it's going to take care of you. And presidents like George Washington, whose closest advisor, Alexander Hamilton, wanted him to be king, and Andrew Jackson, who basically said to the Supreme Court, you know, they've gone ahead and made their federal bank, let them find the money and put the deposits in the federal bank. These were people who understood that there were natural limits on what government can do and written limits on what the federal government can do, and they stuck to those limits. The present government and its predecessors, you know, from Lincoln to Wilson to FDR to George W. Bush to Barack Obama, have so distorted out of proportion what the federal government is to do that the founders would not recognize it at all and would probably want to take up arms against it.
What are you covering tonight, and then we'll let you go? I hope you're going to be covering the healthcare and cap and trade, because
well, it's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about the state of the economy. We're talking about the government subpoenaing media entities, wanting to know who earns how much money, because they have to decide whose income taxes to audit next.
You're kidding. Wait a minute. They're not just... The federal government is subpoenaing media people to know.
They're subpoenaing media companies to find out who earns what and what their Social Security numbers are. This is getting so bad so quickly, far worse than any of us imagined. And the present president hasn't even celebrated his first year in office yet.
Well, since you brought that up,
about tonight.
Since you brought that up, let me just ask you now. Senator Lamar Alexander's gone to the floor and talked about, he's confirmed there's an enemies list. He warned him and said, look, I worked for Nixon. Don't do this. It's been reported I am on the enemies list. I'm going from memory. I think you are too. But what is it? I mean, this is crazy. It is scary to know that there's a real enemies list. And this is, I mean, is this not illegal, Judge?
Well, it's illegal for the president to compile a list of people who disagree with him on the basis of their political opinions and their outspoken words. That was specifically written into the privacy law in 1974, enacted and signed into law by President Ford shortly after President Nixon resigned. These are restraints expressly enacted to restrain the president. But this White House, just like it doesn't respect freedom of contract, just like it doesn't respect freedom of speech, just like it doesn't respect privacy, doesn't respect this either.
Well, I tell you, it's scary, and everybody should pray for the people that are on that list, myself included. Judge, what's the best website for people to visit to find out about all things Judge Napolitano?
Well, they can go to foxnews.com, where my Freedom Watch appears, as do my monologues when I fill in for Glenn, as do many of my op-eds. And, Alex, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed being on with you. I hope we get to do this a lot more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judge. Take care. Have a great weekend coming up.
You as well.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday, but I'm already thinking about the weekend because I'm going deer hunting. All right. Yeah, you go get your hamburger out of the drive-thru window. That's okay. I'm able to go hunting.
Hey, folks.